Hey everybody, here we are again in the wilderness. This is Overland Campaign 160, and we're at the house called Ellwood, sort of a hidden gem here on this battlefield. This place is a wonderful opportunity to explore various parts of the park. You've got Chancellorsville connections, you've got wilderness connections, you've got multiple headquarters, long periods of time with some of the local and civilian stuff going on here, and something really cool we have to show you at the end. So with no further ado, let's bring on Dan Davis, American Battlefield Trust.
Thanks, Gary. Hey there, everyone. As Gary mentioned, Ellwood here on the Wilderness Battlefield is going to be utilized throughout the two-day engagement as Governor Warren's headquarters. Warren is the commander of the 5th Corps of the Army of the Potomac. He's also going to share the headquarters to a certain degree with Ambrose Burnside. Yes, that is Ambrose Burnside of Fredericksburg fame or infamy. And Burnside is here in the wilderness actually as an independent commander. He commands the 9th Corps, but he's an independent commander. He hasn't been fully brought back in, or that command has not been fully brought back into the Army of the Potomac, because Burnside actually outranks George Meade. He has seniority over Meade related to their dates of their general's commission. Grant, Meade, Burnside, and Warren will meet here on the evening of May 5th to plan out the following day's action. And that action will be an assault led by Winfield Scott Hancock's 2nd Corps from the intersection of the Brock Road and Orange Plank Road, which we'll visit later on during our 160th coverage, to strike the right of Lee's line, the 3rd Corps led by A.P. Hill. There's also another incident that takes place inside the house on the evening of May 5th involving Governor Warren, and it comes to us from one of the Union officers, a fellow named Morris Schaff, who wrote extensively about this battle later on in his life. And Schaff tells us that evening that Warren is going over the medical returns, the casualty lists from the day's action. And you'll have to remember that 1864 is an election year, and it's really going to be a referendum on the direction of where the war is going to go. And Warren is going over these reports, poring over these reports, and he makes a comment and gestures with his hand saying something to the effect of, "These numbers will not do." And Schaff interpreted this event as Warren indicating to his subordinates to essentially fudge the casualty returns. Warren knows that high casualty returns seen in the North will not bode well for Abraham Lincoln. So it's a very interesting moment and very interesting battle that takes place here at Ellwood. Now, to talk a little bit more about this area, I'm going to bring on my colleague, Sarah Byerly.
Thanks, Dan. As Gary and Dan have mentioned, we're standing here at Ellwood, a historic home with history that dates back with connections to the Colonial Revolutionary War and early American periods. It has been preserved by the National Park Service and restored with the help of the Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield. All of these layers of history do have a tie in the Civil War era itself. In the spring of 1863, the Union Army of the Potomac and the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia had clashed in the region known as the Wilderness. It was the Battle of Chancellorsville, which resulted in a Confederate victory. As the Overland campaign opens and the armies are converging back into the wilderness again, memories of the Battle of Chancellorsville linger in the minds of the soldiers who had fought here previously. Even though the fighting areas are not exactly on top of each other in many instances, soldiers are passing through the area of Chancellorsville, passing through the areas that had been field hospitals or supply regions as well. And for some soldiers, they're even seeing things that are visible reminders of the Battle of Chancellorsville, perhaps the burned woods, or in some cases, even the unburied remains and skeletons of soldiers who had been killed at the Battle of Chancellorsville. As soldiers see these visible reminders and remember the fighting that has happened here or their advance through the region in the Mine Run campaign in the fall of 1863, they begin to wonder if this region is cursed, and they will write about these dark memories, and this influences how they approach and fight during the Battle of the Wilderness in May 1864. Now we're going to take a walk to look at the special surprise Gary promised at the beginning of the video, and Chris White will take you on that journey.
I'm a terrible surprise, but I'm going to take you on that journey, as Sarah pointed out. But come on, Andy, watch your step there. Andy Poulton behind the camera. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. Please click that subscribe button. Make sure that you hit that like button and head over to battlefields.org to learn more about what we do. As Dan and Gary and Sarah is pointing out, Ellwood is a very important structure because this is the last remaining antebellum before the war structure that is out here on the Wilderness battlefield. At the time of the battle, it was owned by a man named James Horace Lacey. He is one of the richest men in the area. He owns two large estates. One is 17 miles to the east of here, a place called Chatham Manor. It's on the banks of the Rappahannock River, and it was used as a Union headquarters during the Battle of First Fredericksburg by Edwin Sumner. It's also used as a hospital. Fast forward to 1864, we're out here at Ellwood. This is used as Governor Kimball Warren's 5th Army Corps headquarters, as well as the 9th Army Corps headquarters, and it's a hospital. And this land is also owned by James Horace Lacey. But this area was a really interesting place to come out to in the colonial days, as well as the early Republic days. You would start to see a growing small society, some planter class out here, including the Joneses, William and Churchill Jones, who are brothers who build Ellwood, as well as the Woodville plantation. And the Ellwood plantation, to give you an idea, at one point was more than 2,000 acres. It would have sprawled mostly off in that direction, which is out towards the west. If you come across the Wilderness battlefield, you'll see the name Jones Field. That was once part of Ellwood. The Widow Tapp Farm that we're going to go visit later on, that was part of the Ellwood plantation. The Tuning Farm itself was not, even though he was the overseer for a while for the Ellwood plantation. William Tuning figured out that there was a small sliver of the wilderness not owned by the Jones family. He goes in, buys that plot of land, upsets his boss, and his boss fires him for buying a piece of land adjacent to his own. Then he goes off and starts his own plantation. But this whole area is really rich in history. Down over in this direction would be a road towards Parker's store. You might make out that small tree line in the near distance. That will lead you down to Orange Plank Road, Route 621. If you're out here in 1921, you would see the United States Marine Corps and their Expeditionary Force setting up just across the Wilderness Run from us, a silhouette of a battleship, and they would come out here and they would charge across the fields and storm that silhouette of the battleship. There would have been bombers flying over, smoke screens, everything. And it's a big PR stunt by a general named Smedley Butler, a Marine Corps general, who decides that because the War Department wants to get rid of the Marine Corps, he needs to do something to boost morale. He goes to a bunch of Civil War battlefields with the Corps of Marines, puts on these shows, and helps to save the United States Marine Corps from being deep sixed, if you will, by the War Department and the Navy Department. But most people know Ellwood for a different reason, and that is because of the cemetery we're coming upon. If you're the average visitor, have no idea that these small cedar trees out here, the small grove of cedar trees, is actually the Jones Cemetery, the Lacey Cemetery, and others who are buried out here, because there's only one marker, and I call it the armstone, not a headstone, and it notes the site of the burial of Stonewall Jackson's left arm. And he's going to swing around here, give you a better view of it, and I'll get out of your shot. But to give you the idea, give you the backstory of this, on the evening of May 2nd, 1863, about 3.5 miles from here, Stonewall Jackson rides out between the lines, between the Union and Confederate lines at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Jackson is going to not tell any of his men that he's doing this, rides out with a cavalcade of 8 other officers, and then down the Plank Road, or I'm sorry, down the Orange Turnpike will go 10 more horsemen. They will turn around, ride back towards the Confederate lines in the middle of the night, in the middle of a pitched battle. They'll start firing at Stonewall Jackson. The men firing at him are from the 18th North Carolina, and as they start to fire at Jackson, one of Jackson's staff officers, his brother, a guy named Joseph Morrison, will scream, "Stop firing, you're firing into your own men." A volley will ring out because Major John Berry of the 18th North Carolina said, "It's a lie, boys, pour it into him." Jackson's wounded 3 times, once in the right palm of his hand and twice in his left arm, once in the lower portion, once in the upper portion. He will be taken finally off of his horse and laid on the side of the road, where he's finally placed on a stretcher. He's dropped a number of times and then taken back to the Wilderness Tavern, which is less than a mile as a crow flies over in that direction. On the morning of May 3rd, 1863, in the very early morning hours of May 3rd, his left arm is amputated. His reverend, a man named Beverly Tucker Lacey, the brother of James Horace Lacey, who owns Ellwood, is so distraught that Jackson and some other staff officers kind of have to console him for the loss of Jackson's arm. And he's very upset that Jackson's arm's laying over in this pile of bones and discarded arms. And so he decides to wrap it in a sheet and bring it over here for a proper Christian burial. At the same time, one of Jackson's staff officers, named a young man named Keith Boswell, was killed in the same volley that felled Jackson. Boswell will be buried out in this cemetery under the moonlight of May 3rd into May 4th, 1863, as the Battle of Chancellorsville is taking place, and Stonewall Jackson's arm is buried out here as well. Fast forward to 1864. Union soldiers who are out here at Ellwood come over into this area and start poking around, probably digging fire pits and things, and they allegedly find, and I don't know how they knew this, the arm of Stonewall Jackson, that is buried out here. They pick it up, look at it, and put it back into the ground. Fast forward again to 1921, when Smedley Butler and those Marines are out here. There's a reason I told you about those Marines arriving here, because they supposedly come out here, dig up the arm, feel pretty sheepish about it, put it back in a ammunition box, as they put it, and then put it back down in the ground. But in great Marine Corps fashion, they also slap a bronze plaque on the side of it to say that they were here. Great Marine Corps right there, loved it. But the reason we have this arm stone itself is in 1902, 1903, a northern man from New York gave a large sum of money to put 10 markers to important actions on the Chancellorsville, Fredericksburg, Wilderness, and Spotsylvania battlefields, mostly to do with Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee. And one of the markers is going to be this arm marker, as I like to call it, or arm stone to Stonewall Jackson. It was placed here by James Power Smith, who marries into the Lacey family later on. He actually maps out who is buried here and places that large monument here to Stonewall Jackson's arm. Now, Jackson himself dies on May 10th, 1863. He lies in state in Richmond and is eventually buried in the Lexington Cemetery. His body will be exhumed towards the end of the 19th century and placed under a more ornate gravesite about 100 yards or so from where he was initially buried. His widow, Mary Anna Jackson, is supposedly asked if she wants the arm placed in Lexington. The story goes, she asked if it was given a proper Christian burial, and she was told yes, so she allows it to stay here. I've never been able to find corroborating evidence with that, but in the long run, Jackson's arm's allegedly buried here. Now, was Jackson's arm found by Union soldiers? Maybe, maybe not, because there are more than 24 people buried out here. Did the Marine Corps find his arm? Maybe, maybe not, because the Park Service really hasn't located any sort of an ammunition box or anything out here whenever they were doing some archaeological digs. But the story is that Stonewall Jackson, at least one piece of him, still lies on the Wilderness/Chancellorsville battlefield out here at Ellwood. And probably the most famous aspect of Stonewall Jackson in this area, outside of his wounding, is his left arm, buried here at Ellwood, which you can come visit here at Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. Even though it has really no tie to wilderness, and it has no tie to other things, this is what keeps drawing folks here, outside of the obviously beautiful house and the beautiful setting. So if you ever get a chance to come down here, be sure to come out here and check out Stonewall Jackson's arm, if you will, stone on the Ellwood battlefield. Anyone else? With that, we want to thank you for watching this video. Thanks to Dan Davis, Sarah Byerly, Gary Edelman, and Andy Polton behind the camera. I'm Chris White. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.